Welcome to History at High Noon for July. We appreciate everybody that's here. We're going to have an entertaining speaker. He's even brought stuff. But first, I'm going to catch you up on a little thing. We will be doing Legends and Legacies at the cemetery November the 5th at 7:30 and November the 6th at 10 a.m. We will only have 30 tickets per show. I'm sorry, that's the only way I can think of it. So they go on sale October 1st, but if you're here in September for History at High Noon, you can get yours then. Make it, that way you got to come see us. If anybody out there is willing to volunteer 3 hours a month, if they would please give me a call, 381-1135, or text me. We need volunteers during the week on Thursdays and Fridays. If you'll call, I'll see if we can fit you in the slot we have. Appreciate it. Today, our speaker is Larry Mobley, homegrown boy, moved away, came back, and he's going to tell us about the Mobley Brunch.
Let me get my paperwork open here and we can start. Just to let you know, my name, like Carl said, Larry Mobley. I was born here in Douglas, August 1, 1947. My dad got out of the Navy in 46, 45, 46. Started farming, and this is the story he tells me, is he said, well, I was out in the field plowing this big thing behind a mule, and told his cousin, said if I was still in the Navy, I would be going home about now. And the sun was still way up in the air. And that night he got a letter from the Navy, said, we're looking for people. Went to Jacksonville, put his hand up, I do, and never looked back. So I'm a Navy brat, in other words. I was 2 weeks old. He put us on a bus, went to Jacksonville, and he never looked back until he retired. Came back here, settled over on Huffer Road. It's my grandma's old house, and that's where we're at now. We're kind of watching. They're both in their 90s, and we're kind of keep in touch with them. We've actually ended up in Virginia, Linda and myself, and for 50 years. So we left kids, grandkids, the whole bunch, and moved down here to take care of the folks. Carol asked me to do this, so I've been working on this on and off for the last 25 plus years. Found this wonderful website by a guy by the name of, let me flip the chart here real quick. Well, if it'll flip, there we go. And he's called it's a 3-volume set of books that he has done over the last 40 plus years. He's a professor in University of Iowa. His name is Eno Canlari, and he married a Mobley. Let's see. Flip this one back, and there. Oops, nope. Get the right chart here. Okay. But anyway, he married a Mobley lady in Geneva, and they resided in Iowa, and he started doing research because of what he was finding out from different people. This happened before internet, so it was all letters, phone contacts, personal visits. These people went over to England, did research over there, which is where we actually initiated from. And there was a history professor, Vincent, Richard, he was just a general person doing genealogy, Enio doing that, and this is all based on letters by a Milton, who was a professor in University of Mississippi, history professor. Milton Mobley. And so the story they gave, I've compressed a lot of this down to just include the Georgian Mobleys. But the background history, we go back to 1066, England, William the Conqueror. So we're going back 1,000+ years, more or less. And then I'm going to take it all the way up to the early 1800s. In 1066, William the Conqueror crossed the English Channel to take his crown back from his cousin, Harold. And they had the Battle of Hastings, and they defeated Harold. He was killed. And so William he was Duke of Normandy. He became King of England at that point. And with all his buddies that came over with him, he gave them little castles and little towns and places. And he just appointed people all the way around. And one of the people that happened to be that was a Ralph du Montburly, French. So and over the years it became anglicized into Mobberley. And where he was set up at was in Cheshire County of England. Let's see, yeah. And that is right here, Cheshire County of England. Hastings was actually over this end of England, where they crossed over the English Channel and had their battle. So all the Mobleys more or less generated from right there in the way back then. And there's a church there still that has in their stained windows 3 Mobberleys: Patrick de Mobberley in 1206, William de Mobberley 1299, and Richard de Mobberley 1306. And it's still in their stained windows, like churches do. The name changed from Modburley to Motburley to Mobberley over the time of 1,000+ years. Now, moving forward, there's been a Mobberleys in Cheshire up till this day now, and they're still called Mobberleys over there. And then in 1640, somewhere along in there, there was a Lord Mobberley, had 3 sons. First son inherited the estate of wherever in Cheshire. Second Mobberley had a choice, because it always went to the firstborn. Everything goes to firstborn. They get inheritance. Second one had a choice of either going into the clerical or become a military. He went in the army. Actually went over to India, settled in India. Third one was named John Mobberley. He was the first Mobberley in this new country. He was married to a wife called Anne. They came over in the 1640s, settled in what is now known as Maryland. It was a religious, tolerant state, or not state, but settled colony at that point. And he was Presbyterian at that time. They had 5 sons. Didn't talk about the daughters in the research that these people have done. They had 5 sons, though. At least 5 that we know of. There's a couple of others they're questioning. First son was John. He moved to North Carolina in 752, and then his descendants went west into the Ohio Valley, and there's actually some now over as far west as Washington State. So they settled that area. James moved in Virginia, and he settled in Virginia and died in Virginia, and his stayed in Virginia. William, who is the one we're going to be following, moves to North Carolina, and he dies in 1775 in Pitt County. North Carolina. Edward moved to South Carolina, and his people are all still in South Carolina as of today. Thomas remained in Maryland, and his descendants are all known as Mobberleys as of today in Maryland. I've talked to some of those, so they still call themselves Mobberley. So moving forward, we're now up into the pre-Revolutionary War period at this point. And getting into the Revolution and shortly after, a side note, they had two cousins called Cud and Ludd Mobberley. They were arrested after the Revolutionary War because they fought on the side of the British. They were accused of treason, and after the war, Ludd was found guilty and hung. His brother Cud was not. So there was not enough evidence. And William is our Georgia connection now. So William moves from North Carolina to Georgia into St. George's Parish, which is now parts of Burke County. And he marries a lady by the name of Sethi Anderson in the 1730s, 40s. And they have sons again. They're not mentioning daughters here yet. Sons John, Middleton, Biggers, and Azira. And John is, there again, is our connection down to here. John was born in North Carolina about 1755. He was the son of William. They moved from Duplin County, North Carolina to Burke County, Georgia. At that time it was St. George's Parish. John's wife, Sarah, was born 1758 or so. They were married about 1780 in Burke County. John lived in Burke County until 1793 when he was cut into a new county, Screven County. And then following creation of Montgomery County, he moved there where he bought 300 acres, and he was later cut into Tattnall County out of Montgomery. That was about 1801. And his last years he was spent across the Altamaha River in Appling County, where several of his children had by that time moved. He died there in 1832. Now, John, we get to hear about the ladies now, the daughters. John was a private in the Georgia line in the Revolutionary War, so he was granted almost 300 acres of land in Washington County for his services. John had daughters, Lucy, Marianne, Lucretia, then had son, Ludd, William, and then a daughter, Sarah Ann, a son, John, and a son, Solomon, and a son, Jesse Bird, and a daughter, Cynthia. So they had a passel of kids. And Ludd Mobley is my direct great, however many grandfathers going back. And he married a lady by the name of Nancy Pridgeon, who was Mark Pridgeon's daughter at the time. And as you know, we have a Pridgeon up in just the other side of Broxton. So then, and here we go, Lucy, Marianne, Lucretia, Ludd. Now Ludd had sons, Alexander, Mark, daughter Cynthia, son John, daughter Sarah, a son Wilson, a daughter Martha, son Bird, and a daughter Rebecca. And he, on his death, he had assessed a value at that time of $40,000 in cows, farmland, whatever. That equates to about $2 million in today's dollars in land. Per my grandfather, now I haven't found this writing, he had lands of about 10 square miles up on the Ocmulgee River by Mobley's Landing, crossing into Jacksonville. And he had lots and lots of land. Now he had sons, Alexander and John and Elizabeth, Christina, William, Rebecca, so forth. And let me flip this page. There. Now, getting into Ludd, he was fought in the War of 1812. He was involved in the early Indian Wars in Georgia, Florida, and he was one of the first settlers this side of the Ocmulgee River, crossing from Jacksonville. And he set up what they called a store at that time. It was a landing and a store where people could get provisioned. He provided lands for the building of Irwinville, for 40 acres for the initial Irwinville. He provided land for the old Coffee Jacksonville Road, and monies. Now there's a thing that is written down about them. They lived, where they lived was considered Indian territory, and he was apparently friendly with the Indians, the native Indians at the time. He traded with them and was considered honest per what they think. When the Indian trouble started, they started running up and down the river, killing people and stuff, because there were too many people crossing over, getting into their territory. So they came over, and the Indians came to their house, whatever cabin, whatever they had, doesn't really say. They were in war paint, appeared at the Mobley home. Ludd thought the best thing to do was to play along, so he warmly greeted them, invited them to sit down for meal. The Indians immediately accepted and went into Ludd's well and washed off the war paint. So after eating, the Indians asked to see their new baby. They knew they had a baby, and they went in, saw the child, and they tell Nancy, the wife, we're not going to hurt the baby, we're not going to hurt the wife. Then they repainted themselves, went down the river, and killed a whole bunch more people. So, this is actually in the, I read this in several different versions of this, and it's now, where they were is now Ben Hill County and the northern tip of Coffee County. And I found that in Ben Hill County in their history thing, so it's, and plus I've seen it in other places. Let's see, he gave that. Nancy, he died in about 1844, a young age of 45. She died in 1880s, still living in what is now Ben Hill County in whatever the house they had at the time. At Ludd's death, he willed Nancy 3 of their slaves, and two of them were Aaron and Julia, and they assumed the Mobley last name. Now, when she died in 1880, they were still listed in her household, living with her. They inherited the house, the lands, and whatever lands are involved that she had out of the settlement from her husband. So then there's, now there's my dad talked about a fellow by the name of Archie Mobley, who gave a lot of land north of the rocks for the Boy Scout camp up there at the time. This was back in the 1940s or so, late 1930s, early 1940s. All right, now Ludd's children, 10 or so children, they settled Ben Hill, Coffee, Irwin County, Baxley, and on into Florida. One of the daughters was named Dora, settled near Ocala, and farmed an area now known as Mount Dora. If you're familiar with Mount Dora, it's a real ritzy place on one of the lakes. Some of the different names I came across was the Cudd and Ludd, Biggers, Bird, Ludd, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Theodore Roosevelt. These are all different names that I've had coming across reading about all this stuff. If you know the names of Cliff or Mark Mobley, they're my dad's cousins. So, and then let's see. In England, going back to England, they looked at descendants of the Mobleys. Two of them became bishops. Found 5 generals, a university vice chancellor, 2 ambassadors, among the who is or was in England, and several distinguished ladies. The first reference to any of this goes all the way back into Scandinavia, into the Vikings. So, and there's several Viking things about in here. Let's see, what's that? There's pictures. And, okay, and let's see, I've got that. And their trip from England to Maryland, instead of going this way, they went down to Barbados Island. And from what I could gather there, they were provisioning because they were going to be doing tobacco. So they're provisioning for tobacco. There's no mention of any type of slaves other than indentured that they brought from England at this point. So, so the only thing we can gather here is they're actually provisioning for, because they did grow tobacco up there at that time. This was back in the 1600s, so forth. And so you got John went to Maryland, and these are the sons, and William is the one that followed on down into Georgia. And so this is their pathways that they went from Maryland to Virginia, and then westward this way into Tennessee and Kentucky, and then ours went on down into South Carolina and Georgia and flowed on down. And William went to St. George's, had the sons, John, Middleton, Biggers, and Azira. And then, John himself went on down to Burke County, and he was cut into Screven, moved, and then he died in 1832. And living in Virginia, I was able to go into Carolina a lot, and I did find a lot of the little communities called Mobley, so we know that they actually did settle in there. So, so other than that, I am done. Any questions? Any responses?
Between Boyd's Mill and Abbeville, Wilcox County line, there's a state information marker right about the Wilcox County line. Talks about the battle of Breakfast Branch. So this kind of ties in with what you were talking about.
Right. Indians. And I did find out that they're on Huffer Road, right at the corner where the Polks live, there was a fort there and they actually had battles with the Indians. They had to ring the bell or set off the fires, bonfires, or whatever, to bring the people in to hide up in the fort when the Indians were rampaging at the time. So I just picked that up a couple of weeks ago on reading. Yeah, it was a blockhouse fort. Yeah, there was one up on the other side of Jacksonville too, blockhouse fort. Parts of it's still there from what I gather. Now, Ludd has a marker up in there's two Wilcox cemeteries in Jacksonville, just outside Jacksonville. One's on a person's private land. That's a marker that says in memory of, but from what we gather, he's probably going to be in the first Wilcox Cemetery, which is about a mile on down the road back up in a farm field, because there's a whole lot of his brothers and things we found up in there cutting through the woods and chopping weed down and stuff, just doing digging and research and things like that.
Any other questions? Thank you, Larry.
All righty. All right.
We were supposed to be last month, but we got sick.
Well, yeah. Well, actually, it was supposed to have been last year. So this is our third attempt at this. Last year, I was supposed to do it, and that's when the COVID kicked in. We had to shut down. So we were supposed to do it last month. I came down with bronchial pneumonia. So now we said, okay, we'll do this month. This month, we're seeing the numbers starting to creep up. So I said, well, are we going to have a third attempt or not? But
Thank you,
glad
Larry.
to do it anyway.
Next month, we have a special guest coming to talk to us about mill quarters. It will be very interesting. Hope to see you all next month. Mill quarters.